Let's talk about this guy. There was a dude named Aaron Renn, Renn, and he got a really big profile in the New York Times recently. And the reason he got a profile, it was written by Ruth Graham, who's a religion reporter for them, is because this guy is pretty big in the world of evangelical Christianity, very conservative segments of evangelical Christianity. And the reason he was profiled is because odds are you have no idea who this guy is. But within that subculture, he's a big deal. And I'll be honest, I had not heard of this guy before I read that article. But in order to understand why he's famous in those circles, ask yourself this question. Is it hard to be a Christian in America today? Like, of course it's not. You know that. I know that. There isn't any religious or non-religious group that has more cultural cachet, in the sense that other people kind of know what it is you believe. They make references to your belief. Everyone kind of knows what you're talking about when you talk about Christianity. No group has more political power. No group has as many raw numbers of believers, adherents, though that is changing. No one has more infrastructure spread out across the country because there are churches everywhere. No one gets more shout outs at award ceremonies or sports press conferences after games. And more importantly, I think if you ask Christians who think they're being persecuted, all right, well, which religious or non-religious group do you want to trade places with? They're not going to be able to give you an answer because they don't want to switch places. They just don't like that they don't have as much power as they used to. Not that anyone has it better than them, right? That's how good it is to be a Christian. You could be like Elon Musk. I'm going to come back here. You could be like Elon Musk when it comes to wealth, right? You could lose a good chunk of your power, your wealth, and you would still be number one on the list. That's how good it is to be a Christian. At the same time, though, when you are in power and when you've been in power for a really long time, you're going to get criticized. And there's been no shortage of reasons people should be furious with conservative Christianity. I mean, think about all the reasons you should be mad at them. There's the sexual abuse, the propping up of right-wing fascists, the vaccine denial, the destruction of public schools, which they're doing right now, the losing our democracy, rolling back civil rights protections, letting rich people loot the country. All of this has the full-throated support of white evangelical leaders who provide Trump with adoration and function as a shield from attacks, right? So there's a lot of reasons to blame conservative Christians and conservative Christianity for so much of what is wrong with our country, and they deserve every bit of it. So if you are a conservative Christian who's trying to spin that reality to make yourself look good, what do you do? And this is where Aaron Renn comes in. So in 2012, this guy published this article. It's at the journal called First Things. But basically, Aaron Renn, who is not a pastor, he's not a professor, he writes a long article about American evangelicalism. And this is the part he kind of got famous for. He broke it up into 3 segments within the story of American secularization. He says, before 1994, just an arbitrary date, but got to have some number, there was the positive world. And the positive world was a time when people thought if you told someone you were a Christian, that was a good thing. They thought better of you. And he writes there, to be known as a good church-going man remains part of being an upstanding citizen. Back in the day, if you told people you were an evangelical churchgoer, they said, oh, I would trust my kids with you, right? And if you say you're a Christian, he writes, it's a status enhancer. And Christian moral norms, those are the morals everyone gets behind, right? And if you don't do what Christians say, that's bad. So that was the positive world that Aaron Renn is writing about. Then he says between 94 and 2014, they lived in a neutral world where Christianity did not grant you privilege. It might have been good. It might have been bad. Saying to people that you were a Christian could go either way. That's what he meant by neutral world, but this is the big one. He says since 2014, Christians live in a negative world. And that means society, if you tell people you're an evangelical Christian, they look at you like, oh, I'm sorry. What is wrong with you? 2014, by the way, is, I think, the year before the Obergefell ruling made marriage equality legal nationwide. And so he's saying, like, right when that was on the horizon, that's kind of the peak of it's pretty bad to be a Christian, because Christian morals are the bigot morals. Christian values are like purity culture and putting down women and all the stuff they are totally deservedly known for. So what does he write? At this point in the negative world, being known as a Christian is a social negative, particularly in the elite domains of society. Christian morality is expressly repudiated and seen as a threat to the public good and the new public moral order. Subscribing to Christian moral views or violating the secular moral order brings negative consequences. It's a long way of saying, hey, Christians, we are currently in the bad place. That's what he was writing. And he made the argument that things are really bad these days for Christians. Now, maybe he writes there are ways to overcome that. This is what we can do to get out of the bad place, the negative world. But it's going to take some work. But this is what he became famous for. And as he said that, there have been, let me share this from the New York Times article. Why is this so popular? Here's what the New York Times said. Negative world is now the dominant framework for many people trying to understand their place in contemporary America. The idea has inspired conferences, sermons, and countless response essays and blog posts. A reviewer in Christianity Today called it among the most thought-provoking ideas pertaining to American evangelicalism this century. I'm going to take a question really quick because I think I didn't mention this. What's with the 1994 cutoff? I believe that's the year like Newt Gingrich came into power with conservative Christians and really merged the Republican Party with conservative Christianity. And that's when people were like, wait, Republicans are bad people. And now Christians, you're in bed with them. And I don't like that. So that's, I think, where that cutoff came from. What else does the New York Times say? Negative world has turned Mr. Renn into a kind of Malcolm Gladwell of conservative Christianity, a skilled taxonomist known for distilling and naming a phenomenon that many were feeling, but none had articulated. Which is weird because that thing already has a phenomenon. It's like a lack of self-awareness. You could have just said that. Christians are in a bubble and have no idea why everyone hates them. You don't need a special name for that. Not surprising to anybody, in that New York Times article, the reporter pointed out that Aaron Renn was influenced by the right-wing manosphere, the dudes who are like uber confident, even though they have horrible ideas, they're misogynistic. And Aaron Renn loves these dudes. He figures they are far more effective and correct on a whole bunch of issues than conservative Christian preachers who are like weak in his view. Like those manosphere podcast hosts are super alpha and evangelical pastors have gone beta, and we need to fix that. And one of the things he points out, like, what do you do when you live in a negative world? This is kind of where people are going with this. On the Christian right, then, a thesis is emerging. If conservative Christians are no longer a moral majority, but a moral minority, they must shift tactics. They ought to be less concerned with persuading the rest of the country they are relevant and can fit perfectly well in secular spaces. They don't. Instead, they must abandon mainstream institutions like public schools and build their own alternatives. They must pursue ownership of businesses and real estate. And they must stop triangulating away from difficult teachings on matters like sexuality and gender differences, resilience over relevance. In plain English, the way you respond to the negative world framework is Aaron Renn and his followers like Rod Dreher, they all say, Christians, we just need to make our own bubbles and live in them. Don't try to fit in with the rest of these heretics. Just form your own chambers, make your own schools, live in your own world. And that's their solution. We're better off without the rest of them. which is hilariously not true, and they would find that out before long. But also, cool, that would be great. That would be amazing if those Christians got out of the secular space and lived in their own enclaves. But instead, what do? Some of them want to live in a bubble, but in order to do it, they want to take the resources from the rest of us. They want to control the government and then force the rest of us to live in that bubble that they want to create for themselves, which is a horrible idea. And they want to make sure we really, really hate LGBTQ people. That's their solution. If they do that, then it won't matter if no one likes Christianity, because they don't think there's a way to fix that. I mean, the way to fix that is don't be bigots. Follow the science. There's a lot of ways to not be the people everybody hates. They don't want to do any of those things. No. They want to be bigots and have everyone like them. And if you don't like them, well, too bad. They're just going to live in their separate safe spaces and then mock everyone else for wanting safe spaces. I don't know. But this is what they want to do. Another thing that Aaron Renn noted that I thought was pretty funny is he wrote that Trump's election was only possible in a negative world. And his rationale for that is that Christian values are no longer taken seriously, which is why so many people were willing to vote for someone who did not have Christian values, right? Which is hilarious because Trump only got elected because conservative Christians stopped giving a damn about conservative Christian values. Like, don't blame the rest of us. Like, if you just listen to us, Trump never would have been president. Are you kidding me? Like, you guys are the reason this guy crossed the finish line twice. If any of these people actually gave a shit about family values and helping the least of these, or any of that shit Jesus talked about, they never would have supported a thrice married, now convicted felon who brags about sexually assaulting women. So I guess my point is, if people see Christianity as a negative these days, it's because they earned it. We don't see Christianity as bad because they believe in something we think is wrong. It's because we're always surrounded by evidence of how powerful Christians use their religion to hurt other people. We're not mad about Jesus. No one's condemning faith-based food pantries. We're mad about the misogyny and homophobia and hypocrisy and incompetence and ignorance. Like, the people who started the culture wars are acting as if they were just minding their business this whole time, when in reality they were just launching grenades in every direction. They're mad because their shitty beliefs led to them not getting invited to Thanksgiving dinner and getting mocked and criticized by people like us, by celebrities with larger platforms. They're also mad that they are the people the rest of us talk about as soon as they leave the room. Because all the rest of us are like, oh God, thank goodness that dude is gone. They feel like they're owed respect, and they will do absolutely nothing to deserve it. One of the people the New York Times talked to about this dude is a Muslim guy who hated Joe Biden because of the Israel-Gaza stuff. And his name is Harun Mogul, I think, if I'm saying his name right. But he actually drifted to the right and found Aaron Renn's arguments very powerful. But look at what even the New York Times quoted this dude as saying, because it was kind of funny. Because they asked him, do you think Christians are in a negative world? And what this guy said, as a member of a religious minority for whom the United States has never been positive world, he said he did not see neutral or negative world occupancy as catastrophic. Just because wider society isn't embracing me or rejoicing over me doesn't mean I get to lash out in response. The culture may be opposed to you, but that doesn't mean you're not legally and politically secure, which is amazing. This brown Muslim guy is saying, you think you're in a negative world? All right, you can think that, but my dude, you are a white Christian. You're gonna be just fine. The world is made for you. What do you think the rest of us are dealing with? Like, it's possible some people around Aaron Renn actually have some common sense here, if only he listened to them. So these conservative Christians cry about victimhood. They use their power to hurt others. Like, you can't have a pluralistic society with members who think their faith makes them superior to everybody else. And one of the funniest things about the entire article is that the reporter said she went to visit Aaron Renn in his hometown to get a taste of what he's like, where he lives. And where does this guy live? In Carmel, Indiana. It's a suburb of Indianapolis, and more importantly, it's a very wealthy, very white suburb. And I'm not even knocking that, but this dude seems to have no clue about the privilege of the community in which he lives, where everyone's pretty wealthy, they're pretty well off, right? And this is what this guy said, which again, I just found funny because this guy has no self-awareness whatsoever. Carmel is thriving, in Mr. Renn's view, because its Republican leaders have focused on things like public safety, low taxes, and excellent infrastructure and amenities, while avoiding the distractions of what he called extreme ideologies like DEI hiring practices or banning gasoline-powered lawn equipment. First of all, when you live in a red state that is dominated by Republicans, the people at the state level are going to take care of all the culture war stuff, so your communities don't really have to make it a priority. That's one thing. Second thing is, when you live in a relatively wealthy area, crime is going to be lower. That is how poverty works, or the opposite of poverty works, right? And you're not going to have a lot of DEI hiring practices in a place like Carmel. You know why? Because I looked it up. Fewer than 4% of the population is Black. It's a very overwhelmingly white area. So DEI is probably not something they spend a lot of time doing over there. Later on in the piece, or rather somewhere else, Aaron Renn said, Carmel has diversity that works, which is a hilarious thing to say when there is very little diversity in your community. Like, it would be much more persuasive if someone who is in a racial or sexual or religious minority said, yeah, Carmel, Indiana, we have diversity that works. But no, when the white wealthy Christian says it, just doesn't mean much. So this is the dude who's getting all this attention for the thing he said about Christians have it really hard today, and he just has no self-awareness about anything he's doing. He wants to give conservative Christians credit for a country that has been ruined by conservative Christians. And now he wants to give Republicans credit for a country that has been ruined by Republicans. His entire professional career is all about ignoring his own privilege. So it's kind of easy to see why he's considered an intellectual among right-wing Christians and right-wing evangelicals, because like their options are limited. He's smart in the bubble they live in, but he's not that smart, because I listened to what he said. Okay, I will stop there with this story. What questions we got here? Maybe they should do some self-reflection on that instead of blaming everyone else for how they are mistreated. Yeah, why don't you do, evangelicals, some self-reflection on why people might have a problem with you, instead of just saying, everyone looks at me funny, it's their fault. Like, no, maybe you're doing something weird. Have you ever thought about that? And the answer is no. These people have never thought that, like, their opposition to gay people, their exaggerations and lies about trans people, their utter fealty to a batshit crazy presidential candidate, maybe people don't take them seriously because they don't make any good decisions anymore. Never crosses their mind. They love complaining how hard it is to be a Christian, but that's kind of what they signed up for, biblically speaking. Yeah, and that is what some of the people who follow this dude have pointed out. Like, as Christians, we are always the victims. And one of the things Aaron Renn says is, you are right, and that is why we will eventually get over living in a negative world, because we have fought through worse before and will do it again in the future. But there's no awareness that the reason everyone hates you this time is not just because of who you are, it's because of what you're doing. And if you don't change what you're doing, they're still going to hate you. And you deserve it. Maybe we don't take Christians seriously because they vote for someone like Trump. Right on. Yep. Already addressed that. But yeah, I mean, that's one reason you should not trust evangelical Christians to use any kind of moral high ground argument over you. You don't get to say you're the moral people when we see how you vote overwhelmingly, when we see the consequences of your bad policies.